Alright everybody, let's move on to the interactive cube asset. You're going to want to start a new general file by either starting up Blender or by going up to File, New, and clicking General. Let's press Tab to go into Edit Mode. You can also go into Edit Mode by clicking this drop-down menu and selecting Edit Mode. By default, we are in Vertex Select. The next one is Edge Select. We're going to want to select Face Select. Press the number 1 on your number pad to go to the front view. You can do this if you don't have a number pad by holding the accent key on the top left of your keyboard, hovering your mouse over the front, and then releasing the accent key. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to click off of the object so that I know I'm not selecting anything. And then I'm going to select this face here. Next, you're going to want to extrude and scale that new face down. To do that, you're going to want to press E, and then immediately after, press S. You're going to see this appear. You're going to want to move your cursor slightly towards the object until it is about right here. What I'm using for measurement is this line right here. So I'm going to, with that face selected, if you find that you need to adjust the scaling a little bit more, you can press S and then scooch down. I just pressed Control S and I'm going to save the file. Name it whatever you want. I also like to save a version number as well. I don't have to rely on only a single file if I mess up or if a file becomes corrupted. I have other versions to go to. Click Save Blender File. Now we're going to focus on doing the exact same thing to the rest of our 5 sides. I'm going to press 3 to go into Side View. Select this face. Press E on your keyboard and then immediately S. And then slowly drag that cursor inward. We're going to use that same grid line, this one right here. Very good. To go to the top view, press the 7 number on your number pad, and we're just going to continue the process. To access the other sides, because there aren't any number pad shortcuts for them, I'm going to hold the accent key. I'm going to go to left. And we're just going to continue here, pressing E and then immediately S to scale down that newly extruded face. Alright, now that we have that new face extruded and scaled down on every single one of the sides, we're going to want to select all of those new faces by holding Shift and clicking on each of the faces until we've got them all. Make sure you remember to keep holding Shift every time you click a new one, or it's going to let go of all the previous selections. It's going to deselect those. Alright, now all we're going to do is we are going to press the S key on our keyboard because we're going to want to scale all of these outward. I press S on my keyboard and then slowly move that out until you see a little bit of not quite a 90-degree angle right here, right at those corners. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to want to go up here and click the Transform Pivot Point drop-down menu. And then we are going to select Individual Origins. This is going to allow us to extrude and scale down our faces without scaling them down inward. That way we can do them all at the same time. Let me show you what I mean by this. I'm going to go back to the median point as my pivot point, and then I'm going to press E and S. You'll see that when I scale downward, it scales everything down towards the 3D cursor. Now let's go back up to that menu and select individual origins. Press E, and then immediately the S key on your keyboard, and scale down. About this big of a square in the middle. Now we are going to change the pivot point from individual origins back to the median point. And we're going to do the exact same thing, but this time we want it to go slightly inward when we're scaling down. So press E on your keyboard to extrude, S on your keyboard to scale down, and go down towards the center, right about there. Now I'm going to show you how to cut the UV for this cube. The first thing that we want to do is we want to apply any transforms that we have. We want to hold Control A while selecting the object in object mode, and then select all transforms. What that did is now instead of being a modified cube, this is the base form of this object. Now our UVs properly match the mesh that we're looking at. To look at the UV editor, we're going to go to the UV editing workspace up here. You'll see that we have two windows. We have the UV editor window right here, and we have the 3D viewport over here so that we're able to view our object in perspective mode. I want to select all of my mesh, so while my cursor is over here next to my object, I'm going to press the A key on my keyboard. You'll see that the UV looks the same as a 3D cube unfolded, the default UVs that you'll see on a 3D cube. And that's because we haven't unwrapped since we had that UV generated. And what unwrap means is basically unfolding that based on the seams that you mark to be cut. Right now, there are no seams. If we want to click UV and go to reset, that'll start us over. Everything is folded on top of each other. That's why we see a bright white UV shell instead of separate UV shells. That makes sense visually. In order for us to unfold our mesh into a proper UV, we are going to need to cut some seams. So I'm going to click anywhere outside of my object so that I deselect what I had selected. Then I'm going to press 1 on my number pad to go into front view. Once you're in front view, you're going to want to be in edge select. Make sure you're in edit mode. We're going to want to select these 4 edge loops right here. Down to here or here. Let me see. Yep, down to here. And we need to cut all 4 of those on every single one of the sides. So let's start by doing that. I'm going to start with the front view. To select an edge loop, like I did there, you're going to want to hold the Alt key on your keyboard, and while in edge select the edges that you want. You'll see that I deselected what I had there, so to make sure that you keep it, like I said before, hold Shift and hold Alt so that you're still grabbing all of the edge loop, and select that again. Now we have both of them. Keep selecting them until we have all 4 of them right there. Now we can go back to UV and press Mark Seam, and then go to another side. So go ahead and press Alt, click that side, 2, 3, 4. And to bring up the UV menu quickly, press the U key on your keyboard, and go to Mark Seam. Very good. Continue doing that until all the sides are finished. Now that we have those edges marked, we have one more set of edges to go. This is easier done in perspective mode because this line right here kind of hides. You kind of accidentally click the one in front of it if you are in front mode. So I'm going to tilt by holding the middle mouse button and rotating a little bit so I can see it better, and press this edge right here, click this edge right here, and you're going to want to also click all of the other ones around. So I'll go to side view, adjust my view a little bit, and then select these edges here. And we don't need to select this edge because it's already marked. Now our object is fully marked. We have all the seams that we want to cut by. I'm going to go back into layout mode. Here's the object with all the marked seams. I'm going to hold shift and then press Z, and that enters wireframe mode, and you can see exactly the cuts that I made. Press shift and then Z to go back into solid mode. And those, by the way, are just different forms of viewport shading. The viewport shading menu is up here. You've got wireframe mode, solid mode, and since we have the default white texture that the cube is given, that is what we still have. And then we also have rendered mode, which is a lot like material preview but with the lighting affecting the object. Now we're ready to unwrap our object. So let's go back up to UV editing up here, click on the workspace. Make sure you have everything selected by pressing A on your keyboard. Press U on your keyboard to bring up the UV mapping menu and click Unwrap. And if you've done everything correctly, then it should look like this. If you see anything other than what you see here, it's most likely the results of two things. One, you might not have applied your transforms. Go back to your layout, hold Control and A. It will bring up the Apply menu as long as you have your object selected, and then you want to select all transforms. Make sure, by the way, that you're in object mode. Otherwise, that menu won't appear. Another reason is more than likely you have one of the seams cut wrong. So just go ahead, rewatch parts of the video, and double check that you have everything selected correctly. Now what I want to do is apply a temporary image texture to our object so that we know that there is no stretching in our UVs, and we also want to rearrange our UV layout over here so that whoever is texturing the model will be able to fully understand where everything lines up. For a model like this, it might not be as important because we're planning on texturing every single side the same, so everything would be able to line up seamlessly regardless, but in a lot of models you're going to want to make sure that the right things are lined up But for more complex textures, you're definitely going to want to make sure that your UV is arranged in a way that makes sense. Let's go up to the shading workspace up here. You've got a file browser, you've got a image viewer, and you have your node editor right down here. So this might look confusing, but it's actually very simple. We've got two nodes down here. The material output, everything that is connected to the material output controls what we see on here. Right now the only thing connected to it is the only other node, which we have got a Principled BSDF shader. With these you can control things like the base color. I'll change that just to demonstrate. You can add a subsurface color, so by pressing 0.15, I'm giving it more white tint. I can change that. You see when I have it over here to the blue, definitely gives it more of a blue tint. If I bring it over to the red, it definitely makes it a little more yellow, brings out more of that yellow-green. If you move that to 0, it takes that away. And then we've got the metallic property. You increase it to change the way the lighting affects the shader. Same with roughness. Move it all the way down to make it extremely smooth. You can move it up to make it more matte. And things like this clear coat, which add a shine to it. Right now the only thing we're going to be worried about is this base color, and we want to attach it to an image texture. To add an image texture, we're going to add a new node. Let's hold Shift and A, hover over Texture, and then select Image Texture. It's going to be following your cursor, and you're just going to want to click on the left-hand side of this node to place it. We're going to want to connect these nodes here. You want to connect these two nodes by color and base color. So right here where this yellow dot is, I'm going to click, hold, and drag out. That way I can make a connection, and it snaps over to this one, and I release, and now they're connected. It's black because there's no image selected. You're going to need this image. We have it included for you. So if you don't have it downloaded, go ahead and do that now. First, I'll show you the other options and explain why I prefer the image that I chose. To get to Blender's UV grid, you can click New. Where it says Generated Type, you want to switch it from blank to UV grid, and then press OK. So the cube is a wonderful example of why I prefer to use a different texture rather than this default one. You wouldn't be able to tell if any of these shells were next to the wrong one because of the pattern looking so similar. If I go to the UV editing workspace, and then over in the viewport shading menu, I select Material Preview. I'm going to deselect, and then with the face select selected, I'm going to hover over one of the sides and press L. What that's going to do is it's going to select the UV shell, the boundaries between these marked seams. So that makes it very convenient for us. And now you can see right here that this one is our front UV shell. Another way of confirming that is by moving it on here and watching it move in the viewport. You can see wherever is placed over this UV shell is what texture appears over here. We're back in the shading workspace. I'm going to press X right here to get rid of that UV grid. Now, to open an already downloaded texture image, we are going to want to press Open, and I'm going to select the checker map texture and press Open Image. Now you can see and you can actually differentiate the different sides. Now something I haven't been mentioning is that there is absolutely no stretch. Let me show you what it would look like if there were. I'm going to press T in this viewport to bring up the tool menu. Wherever there's a 3D viewport, you can bring up the tools. It just might be hidden. So I'm going to press the scaling tool, and I'm going to scale the entire object out. That's what stretching looks like. It seems obvious, but it might be confusing to understand why it looks like this if you're a beginner. Now it makes sense why taking this object and stretching it would make the texture look stretched. But why would a model that we just started texturing look stretched? Well, it would be because you didn't apply your transforms. If you remember, we started out with a cube, and that cube had a UV that was automatically generated when it was created. Any modification that we made after that was stretching the model in different ways, and that's what creates stretching. We stop that by making sure that we apply all of our transforms before we unwrap our UV layout. Let's go back to the UV editing workspace. You'll see that it shows our image on the UV editor now. On this side, I'm going to press A to select everything. And something I like to do, and this is just a personal tip, this is just preference, is I box select all of the UVs here and I move them outside of the texture area so that it's easier to see each individual island. An island is another word for these individual parts. If I go over to the UV selection menu, you'll see that it's by default on vertex. We want it to be all the way at the end on island. So island, shell, those are just interchangeable names that we call these individual pieces that move after you cut the seams. Now that we can see the shells correctly, I am going to press 1 on my number pad on this side, and I am going to deselect everything that we see. We know that all of our UV shells are up here, and so I can start dragging islands in one by one into our space the way we want them to be arranged. So in face select, I'm going to press L on this front facing face, and this is the first island we are going to put in our area here. As we drag it down, you can see that it is sideways. So I'm going to press the R key on my keyboard and then 90, and that makes the numbers right side up again. And that's one of the biggest benefits for these numbers, is being able to tell which way a UV shell is oriented or flipped. Now that you have your front facing UV shell right there, I'm going to go to the side view by pressing 3 on my number pad. So we are going to want to grab this UV shell by pressing L, and you'll see that it brings up the new island without making the other one disappear, which is good. And we're going to want to drag it to the right hand side, just like we moved from the front to the right hand side here. You can see we're sideways again, so I'm going to press R on the keyboard and 90. That's going to rotate at 90 degrees. And we're going to want to put them next to each other, but not right on top of each other or overlapping. We want to make sure that there's a space in between them so that the texturing artist, whoever that is, can easily color without things overlapping. Now you can see that it's arranged correctly. If I move it side to side, both of these shells here, you can see kind of a seamless transition into both of the parts of the texture. Now let's go to our left side by holding the accent key and by selecting left. Press L while hovering over the middle here, and then we will click and drag that face to the left hand side of the front facing one. Now let's press R90 to get it rotated correctly. Make any minor adjustments you need to and do the test. Let's box select all of these and move them side to side, and you can see that there is a seamless transition there. There isn't going to be for everyone, but it really helps the artist understand where the UV shells are supposed to be in relation to the mesh by having it set up this way. So let's press 7 on our keyboard to go to the top, press the L key, and then we'll drag this down to sit on the top. This is also sideways, so we'll press R and 90. And now let's go to the bottom. Select those as well. And rotate it. This one needs to be rotated negative 90 degrees, so I'm going to press Ctrl Z and press R on my keyboard and negative 90. There you go. That looks great. And now we just need the back. It's not going to be able to line up to every single one of these edges, so we're just going to have to pick one. I'm going to press L to select all of these, and I'm going to go ahead and pick the side here. And now we'll rotate it. Oh, this one doesn't need 90 degrees, so I'm going to undo that rotation. I'm going to press R and 180. There you go. Let's do that little test again. Perfect. You'll see that some sides are moving in different directions, but that's just how it is. That's you're not going to be able to get it all to line up when you're unfolding it into a flat image like this, but making it, doing it as much as we could is really going to help the texturing artist understand the shape of this object when you're just looking at the UV shell. They'll also be able to better understand that this one right here is our front-facing face. This is top, bottom, left, right. We made this UV very readable. The last thing we're going to want to do is scale everything down. Make sure you have everything selected. Press S and scale it all down because we need everything to fit inside of this boxed area. To export your UV layout, go up to UV and select Export UV Layout. It's going to have you save it as a PNG file. Now your cube is ready for texturing. Good job!